we get started because this is going to be a conversation. So really appreciate everybody jumping on here for a shift in cybersecurity. And like I said, this is going to be a conversation with us, but then also feel free to really come off mute, ask your question, put your question in chat. I'll be monitoring the chat along the way, as well as asking the questions. But as with every webinar that we have, this is all for you. This is an education session. This isn't us trying to pitch some product or anything out there. It is merely, hey, we're here to help and we're here to educate. And security, especially cybersecurity, is always changing. And we want to provide you with the information you need to prevent bad things from happening. So really appreciate for your time today. And so what I'd like to do first is tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ben Grimion. I'm a senior account executive here at Davenport Group. Been with Davenport Group over 11 years. Prior to that, I worked at Dell Technologies for 10 years. So I've been in this space for about 21 years. And I think we may need to get an update on this picture because I got a little bit more gray hair under my chin. But I like to lead these webinars because I like to interact and educate with folks on our team. But I love being a part of Davenport Group because of what we do here with these webinars. So for those of you that are maybe new to Davenport Group, let me tell you a little bit about Davenport Group as a whole. We are a full-scale IT solution provider. So that means we can help you out with solutions from mouse to the cloud and really anywhere in between. And we have a full security portfolio here that we're going to kind of highlight some of the points here today. But we have individuals and partners that we work with that we're going to really highlight today around security. However, we can help you out with solutions across the board, whether it's data center infrastructure, virtualization, VMware, which is a very big topic today. We can help out with that transition from the way you interacted with VMware before into the way to interact it with Broadcom now. We are a Broadcom partner. We are a Dell Technologies partner. We're a VMware partner. We're a Microsoft partner. We can really help you out with anything and everything. We have certified engineers to help implement those solutions, scope out the solutions, train you on it. And the biggest thing that I've seen over the last 21 years working here that's different from other providers that are out there, because there's a bunch, is we truly stand behind our solutions. So what that means to you as a IT professional is if we implement a solution, you can always reach out to us to get retrained on it. Heck, if you hire more people and you want them to get the same training you got before, we can do that. All a part of standing behind those solutions. And that's what really makes Davenport Group different. And our focus on that relationship with our customers shines through. So let's get into the conversation here. We have three fantastic panelists to talk about cybersecurity today, kind of what's new out there. We have Brian Bennett, who's with Davenport Group, Perry Carpenter with Nova4, and then also my good friend Corey Clark at SonicWall. And I'll let them introduce themselves before we get started here. Brian, you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to those that hadn't crossed over the threshold yet. But Brian Bennett, I'm the field CISO here at Davenport Group. So not only am I responsible for being the CISO for Davenport Group proper, but I help customers just like yourselves staying up on the security topics. I've been doing IT now since coming back from Iraq 2004. Started off as a cable puller and I've climbed the ladder, but been working the last 6 or 7 years as a virtual CISO and a virtual CIO. So I appreciate everybody tuning in today. And next up, Perry, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey there, my name is Perry Carpenter. I'm the Chief Human Risk Management Strategist at Nova4, and I've spent the bulk of my career at the intersection of technology and humanity, and specifically things like cybersecurity and the way that humans think, act, work, behave, the ways that we can start to influence the behaviors that we want so that we minimize human risk. And fundamentally interested in things like deception and social engineering and why people do things that they never thought that they would do at times that they thought that they would know better. And so that's been my focus, really interested in the discussion today. So thanks for having me, and to the audience out there, thanks for being here.
Hello, everyone. Corey Clark. I'm with SonicWall. I come from the same thread as Brian, where I started off as, hey, take this cable, go that way until I tell you to stop. So definitely been that route before. To the point where I'm at now in the last 10 years, my organization's been acquired by SonicWall. I created a security operations center roughly 10 years ago, still going strong today. I've been the lead in creating endpoint security solutions for MSPs to be able to provide to their customers.
Awesome. So you can see we have some fantastic panelists here from different walks within the cybersecurity realm. So we're going to have some different opinions. Hey, we may even have some arguments here. That'll be fun. But let's get into the questions. We have a number of questions I'll be going over with our panelists, but I want to encourage you that are attending here, feel free, you can take yourself off mute and ask a question if you have some for our panelists, or put your questions in chat. Now, one thing I want to remind you with chat is sometimes organizations lock down users' chat, so you may not be able to put it in the chat, and that's where, hey, if you can come off mute, feel free to do so and ask that question. So we'll dive right into it with that. Corey, you're first up here. Kind of establish something in the environment here. What do you think a security stack overall should look like in today's landscape?
Yeah, thank you. Very subjective questions. Everyone that you ask this question will tell you something different. So I used to have what I called my pyramid, right? My triangle. My triangle has 3 points. So if you asked me this question 10 years ago, I'd say, okay, well, first you have to have a good endpoint solution, a good antivirus. You have to have a great firewall, and then you have to have good email security. Well, as everyone knows, as the time has changed, the threat landscape has changed. Firewalls aren't as prevalent as they used to be 10 years ago. So when someone asks me this question now, first I have to say, okay, well, there's not a one-size-fits-all security stack for every organization, because every organization has different compliance standards, different risks, and more importantly, that's going to really drive this is a different security budget. So when I look at a security stack, I always go with the requirements. What would I require? First and foremost, we still have to stick with the endpoint. And it's no longer just an antivirus. You need what's called an MDR, Managed Detect and Response Solution. MDR is a combination of a good antivirus, a good EDR, and then the response capability, which means someone is monitoring it, a security operations center, right? Then you have to go into identity. So majority of organizations have some type of cloud presence. I can tell you, I said it earlier, I created a security operations center, or a SOC. 84% was my last 90 days. 84% of the alerts my SOC send are around Office 365. That is how broad the attack surface is. So there needs to be good identity management and monitoring. And then that also can, and then, the final point is going to be a good email security solution. That also kind of goes hand in hand with identity, right? Where you have to have a solid email security monitoring for phishing attacks, because that's still going to be the #1 attack surface that they are going to hit you on. Now, obviously, if you have a brick and mortar, right, a firewall is super important. That's your front door, preventing someone from getting in the first place before your antivirus has to come into play. Now, one thing to always keep in mind, tools aren't going to be the catch-all, end-all to everything. So you need help. You need either an MSP, an MSSP. You need someone monitoring it. You need a SOC, right? Because, majority of attacks happen in the middle of the night when you're sleeping, happen on the holidays when you're out having a barbecue or doing something like that. And so that's where you need monitoring, has to be a part of your security stack.
I couldn't agree more with that. Brian, anything you'd add to that?
Well, I mean, just to build off what Corey said, I mean, every organization is different. Compliance drives a lot of these conversations, whether you are a government contractor, whether you're in healthcare, whether you process payments. I mean, you get into now there's requirements I'm seeing where, we have to get out security awareness training. We have to get out and get in front of what is happening on the landscape, educate our users, because they are truly the first ones that are going to see it. I mean, they are going to be the users that are targeted. Since COVID, the work from home sent everybody home. That was an easy play for the threat actors because they knew that your attentions were going to be elsewhere. Laundry, getting dinner ready, picking up the kids, and those type of conveniences brought great risk to organizations. So again, it goes down to what are the requirements, and then of course, budget's always a thing. And I'll always tell you, more times than not, that anytime that there's been a recent event, any kind of attack on the company or someone close to the company, somehow it does magically free up money that has never been there for you before. Perry, anything else you could think of?
Yeah, I would just echo that and bring that out a little bit more to the forefront. So I would explicitly see the end user population as a part of the security stack. I think that they're a critical layer of security, and that's the way that we need to think of them. So as we're thinking about network layer, identity layer, web layer, different endpoints, I think we also have to see the human layer as a critical part of the stack. And so other comments that I have today will kind of tease that out a little bit more, so I won't spend too much more time on that right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure Perry's going to mention education to your end users. It's going to be a big piece of it there. So thank you all for the answers there. So Perry, I'm going to go to you. Let's hear some new stuff. What emerging trends are you seeing in a social engineering attacks targeting remote and hybrid workforces? Because I'm sure most of the folks in this environment are attending here today are having to deal with that.
Yeah, and I think that this is a good segue into that because we were just talking about hybrid workforce, the distraction, the fact that people are doing laundry, the fact that they have other parts of their lives intruding into their minds several times. And even when we start to think about some of the trends within the tech industry right now and pulling everybody back to the office, that creates entirely new stresses, entirely new distractions within people's mind because for the past 3-ish years, they've been in a different mode. And so that the flux that people are in is something that attackers can and will take advantage of. The other thing is that, I know everybody wants to talk about AI, and I definitely will in a second, but I think that the lower tech attacks are still really, really working. A simple, let's call up Bob in accounting and social engineer Bob in accounting into doing something works really, really well because we typically train and we talk about all of the sexy tech-laden stuff. We're going to talk about phishing. We're going to talk about deep fakes and video deep fakes and all these other things that we do want people to be aware of. But the fact is that because the media and because we are enamored in those things, people don't even think about those lower tech channels. And when they're on the phone, they're typically multitasking. They're doing several other things. They may even be, if they're working from home, doing the dishes or doing their laundry or something else at the same time. And so incredibly easy for somebody to take advantage of. And then, of course, when you have that channel that you're speaking to somebody through as the attacker, where they're not expecting to be taken advantage of, you can now leverage AI in that in a really, really interesting way, either through voice disguising or through having an automated large language model on the back end that's sending its stream through a voice text-to-speech system. And now you have an automated attack vector that is able to think. It doesn't get scared. It doesn't get flustered. And I've shown personally at DEF CON a few weeks ago that those will work at the level of people who have been doing this, humans who have been doing this for 20 plus years. So we're going to see more and more of that. The other thing I'll touch on really quick is attack sophistication from the phishing standpoint continues to rise, in that the attackers are getting more and more crafty in how they obscure the links. And so more and more things like the link is on a Google Drive somewhere. So they send a legitimate link to something that's on a Google Drive that's supposed to be going to like a Microsoft Word document, but the first thing in the Microsoft Word document is a malicious link or is something else. And so nesting the poison pill kind of in a Russian doll type of way is something that's happening more and more and more because it gets through those levels. The immediate scan that tends to happen through a secure email gateway or something else.
I just had to deal with one of those. I mean, you're right. It's becoming more sophisticated, even with small little pivots to what they're doing, right? You know, I was cursing the adversary in a recent attack where they sent a OneNote link. Your email security is not going to stop someone or flag a OneNote link. It's a Microsoft, hey, here's my OneNote. Come, I shared it with you. Come here. In that OneNote is where it hosts the malicious link that they're trying to get the, you know, adversary token stealing, all that fun stuff. And so, you know, again, it highlights what I said earlier. The tool, you can't just rely on the tool, right? We need to get smarter. That comes through a lot of education as well.
And it does. I mean, I just ran across one a couple of weeks ago where just an at-home user sent me something. You know, it's easily, you know, obtainable if you know what you're looking for to find out who, you know, someone's ISP is. You can find their IP address, you know, quite easily. But they got a spoofed email to their personal email account pretending to be their ISP. And because of that public information, you know, of course, it was a link or attachment, whatever it was. But, you know, Perry, you touched on it, you know, those low tech attacks are still working. And it's just driving the awareness to things like that, you know, just what can be real.
Yeah, one of the latest trends I'm seeing as well is where they're sending, I think we've all probably known someone or received one ourselves, where you get an email from an adversary saying, hey, I have direct access to your phone. I've been spying on you. You've been doing naughty things. And I'm going to send out all these pictures and videos to all your friends, right? We've all seen it, received them, or heard someone that had it, right? And now they've pivoted. And what they've done is they now go onto Google Maps and they take a screenshot, but then they crop it so you can't tell it's Google Maps and show you the front of your house. And so here you are, this victim of this, you know, phishing attack, where they're going to send to you, they're going to have a picture of your house. Well, now you're like, oh, wow, this seems more legit. With just that small little thing, they're catching more people now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You know, and I think that one of the other things, especially as we're talking about like senior citizens, or even actually, I would say all of us. We typically throw senior citizens like to the wolves and say that they're the main victim in these things. But I think that one of the most nefarious attack vectors right now is still snail mail. It is a really good letterhead, a really good you know, envelope, and the fact that doing official business over normal post is so uncommon for most of us that you get something that's printed really well, has a good story behind it. You're like, I don't know if that's legit or not. You can't click on the headers to look at it. You can't, you know, do all the interrogation that we teach regular people. And so then you have to do legwork to figure out if it's real. And I think that the fact that we're not doing business as much through regular mail anymore is going to open that up as, you know, one of these vectors that people can really, really do some malicious stuff through.
Well, and I see it coming too with the amount of data that people are willing to put on social media, just the deep fake attacks, being able to, you know, pull down that data, manipulate it, push it against you, and now that becomes a whole new threat vector that I think artificial intelligence is going to help drive as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it sounds like we're seeing it all all different levels, all different age groups, in all different ways, even old school snail mail that you're seeing, kind of emerging trends within social or engineering there. So let me shift it over to Brian here. And so, Brian, how can organizations like the folks that are attending here foster that culture of cybersecurity awareness that keeps pace with rapidly evolving threats like y'all were talking about?
This is a good conversation. I have this conversation quite often, just most recently this morning. I mean, first and foremost, it's got to be started from the top. I mean, the leaders of the organizations have to buy into this and understand the risk that the employees bring to the organization. So they truly need to understand that, grasp that conceptually, and then use that as the backing voice to get something in place. Then it falls on to your IT leaders, your directors, your managers, is finding training and material that is relevant. Things that we were talking about today, the social engineering trends, what's out there. This is the stuff that the end users are going to see. It needs to be real. We need to be current. We need to make it entertaining. I came from the DoD, working in the DoD for about 10 years, and trust me, there's no joy there. Everything's cut and dry, black and white. And I can remember sitting through hours of just PowerPoint slides and reading documents. No one can retain that after sitting there for hours. So finding ways to make it enjoyable, even down to the point of maybe even having inner org contests. Maybe you break it up into teams, HR and finance and IT and sales, and have contests. Who can complete all of their training the fastest and pass the phishing tests, and then use that as some kind of game, if you will, and have rewards. But you have to find creative ways to get engagement, because again, right back to the point I think we've all touched on, our end users are always going to be the biggest risk. And the more that we can make them aware, train them, get them to understand what is really out there, that they might be seeing, it's going to just better off the org.
Perry, anything to add, kind of coming from the education space, where I see KnowBe4? Is there anything else that you've seen other organizations do to foster that culture of awareness?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I do is kind of shift the narrative a little bit. So rather than thinking about a culture of awareness or even a security culture, what I'm really after is an organizational culture that values security. So to realize that security values are woven into a larger organizational culture that understands, several different facets about the way that employees learn, the way that they value things, the way that they behave, the way that they interact with one another. And so at the end of the day, what you're starting to think about is that the things that I'm hoping that people know, I don't want them to know those things just for the sake of understanding, just for the sake of knowledge. I want people to know things because ultimately I'm wanting them to value those things, bring those things in, believe those things, and then even more so to act in a certain way because of it. Information without action is kind of irrelevant in a lot of ways, because I can have somebody that knows all the right things, that passes all the right tests and everything else, but they might do the wrong thing at the time that I need them to really act in the way that I'm hoping for the most. At the same time, I can have somebody that's not really been quote unquote trained on something, but at the right time, they just reflexively do the right thing. And there's a lot of reasons that can happen too. And that's because some behaviors are caught rather than taught. Some things are modeled by the employees, modeled by the executives, and people just bring that on subconsciously, and then they behave accordingly. And so understanding that all of those kind of dynamics are at play gives you a wide palette of things to paint with. There are going to be things where you just need to give people information and you need to let them sign a policy acknowledgement. But there are other things that are really, really risk important behaviors that you can find ways to habituate your people to just build the right muscle memory and the right reflexes on. And that then, when you realize that you can start doing those kind of things, it starts to really just kind of broaden your perspective on how you can handle this from a programmatic perspective.
Yeah, and some of the biggest things that I've always done, especially the initial conversations where I'm coming in, is I say, hey, remind your users in your environment, this isn't just to protect assets within the organization. These are tools, this is education you can use personally. And heck, a lot of the times that we take our classes and training that we do, I hang up, I call my mom and dad, and I say, hey, y'all need to be looking out for this, to educate them as well, because it's all hitting us. We all get text messages to our personal phone, same type of spoofing and phishing that we see across the board in organizations. So it can not only help the business, the organization, it can help you personally. So,
and sometimes, real quick, sometimes, right? Like I've had engineers feel like they were too smart to take the cybersecurity training requirements that we have, asking to be exempt because they're too smart for this. It's just being transparent and reminding them, hey, sometimes it's not about changing your life and educating something you don't know. Sometimes it's about reminding you. I have to have my wife remind me all the time with dealing with my teenagers, be nice, be kind, be fair. She has to remind me, even though I know that, sometimes it's good to have that reminder. Hey, keep in mind, these things are still out there. Don't get complacent in your day to day. These things are still out there. And just a blip of a reminder, taking a 5-minute video is not going to be, might not change your life, but it might give you that quick reminder when the event does come around.
Yeah, it could be just one stupid click, and you're going to be reminded of that for a long, long time.
It only takes one.
Yeah, exactly. So Perry, I'm going to come back to you here with the next question. And just a reminder, everybody, if you have any questions, feel free to put in your chat. I see some great sharing of content here. So I recommend you look at that if you're able to participate in the chat. But if you've got your questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll bring them up to our team. So let's get into this next one with you, Perry. What are the biggest misconceptions and or impacts related to AI-driven threats? Because, obviously AI is big on our minds, but what are people kind of blowing out of proportion or maybe overthinking?
Yeah, that's a really good one, because I think that, and I alluded to this earlier, I think that whenever we talk about AI threats and we talk about deep fakes, and when the media makes a news story about it, we are much too fast to say, oh, look, and here's how you can tell this thing was a deep fake. That the hair is kind of messed up here, or the fingers kind of look a little bit like a blob over here, or the text in the background isn't readable. And the problem that brings with it is that the reason that those artifacts are there is because somebody settled when they put that out. They created a version, and then they were just, that's good enough. The other problem that comes with it is that if you are going to start to tell somebody to look for those things, it creates a false sense of security, because 2 months later, the tells are going to be different, or they may be non-existent because the tools continue to improve, or they'll be different or non-existent because maybe those tells were there in the version that somebody created, but then they import it into Photoshop and they fix it. So I stay away from talking about the things that may give away a photo, because I think it gives people a false sense of security. And because when you're doing a presentation about deepfakes or a news story about deepfakes, people believe that they have superpowers. They'll look at it and they'll go, well, obviously, because whatever. But it's a completely different story when that's mixed in with 30 other things in your social media feed, and you're just kind of doom scrolling. And then you see it, and then you have the emotional reaction to it, and then you behave in a certain way because of it. So rather than teaching people about here's how to tell if it's a deep fake, I actually change the discussion. And I say, maybe that's not an important question. Maybe whether it's, quote unquote, real or fake doesn't matter. The thing that matters is, why does this piece of media exist? And why did it get in front of me? And when I can start to ask those questions, I can say, well, now you kind of go back to behaviors that we understand, like things about how to stop phishing attacks. Well, if I stop and then I start to interrogate myself a little bit and say, what does this thing make me feel? What emotions are being invoked? Well, then if I'm starting to feel fear or urgency or frustration or authority or something like that, or like it's confirming a bias, well, then maybe I can start to move in and I can analyze it a bit more, and I can start to investigate it and say, do these claims make sense? Where's this coming from? So I start to ask all these recursive questions after that. And then I might get into the, oh, this is trying to get me to do X or believe Y. And once I get to that level, then I've started to unravel the whole mystery behind the thing. And so, again, the question of why this media exists and whether it's a quote unquote deep fake or not is a secondary thing. The other thing is that right now, what we call cheap fakes are just as effective, if not more effective. Slightly edited, legitimate video, slightly edited, legitimate audio, something taken out of context and put somewhere different. A legitimate image that's been cropped deceptively, or an image of a war zone from 3 years ago that looks like an atrocity has taken place that somebody then attributes to something that they say just now happened. All that, again, whether it's a deep fake or not doesn't matter. The question is, why is it in front of me and what's it making me feel? What's it want me to do because of that? And I think when we broaden that question out, it makes us to start to ask and answer things that are way more important.
Corey, any thoughts around this? Have you seen AI-driven stuff?
I mean, yes and no. So when I look at AI-driven things, so first and foremost, when it comes to defense, most security organizations use some form of AI, right? I can even think of an antivirus company now that hasn't integrated some form of AI, machine learning, et cetera, right, into their products. So we've been using this for a while. Doctors use it to more effectively diagnose cancers off scans, right? When it comes, I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I see is that, AI cyber attacks are always super highly sophisticated. And that's not the case. What I typically see, the main driving factor behind an AI-driven attack is for two reasons: speed, scale. They can do things a lot more quickly and at a much bigger pace, right? So, if I go to the bar and I ask a person for $1 and they say no, if I ask 100 people, at least if one person said yes, I made $1 that night. Let's go, right? So it's the same thing when they do these attacks. It's kind of like a spray and pray. Sorry for military jargon, right? It's kind of like a whole, just like, let's just see what sticks to the wall here. And, someone's going to fall for this. If at least one person falls for it, then boom, I made it. And now I can send this out to so many people, so much quicker in time. Most organizations are now obviously leveraging AI internal to their organizations to kind of help speed up their process, right? So perfect example is where we've been looking at it from a SOC standpoint, where it's like, okay, all of this manual analysis that a level 1 analyst is doing, can I leverage AI to get to a faster root cause analysis, right? I'm not eliminating the level 1. I'm just shifting focus of what he's doing and then having the AI do the much quicker, right, initial analysis to get to the person. It's going to be a very, very long time if it ever happens that AI can completely replace a human, right? I'm firm that, face on glass is still a lot more important than just what the tool and what AI can do for you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I appreciate it there. And so let's kind of shift gears away from AI and into another topic that's really kind of driving a lot of the initiative, or at least the conversations and IT professionals being listened to, is around cybersecurity insurance. And so, Brian, I'm going to go to you. What factors have driven recent changes to cybersecurity insurance that you've seen?
I mean, first and foremost, it's the amount of ransomware payout. I mean, the amount of money that this business of ransomware is drawing is astronomical. And so organizations, of course, one of the ways that we can transfer risk is for a cyber insurance policy. It doesn't get rid of the risk. It doesn't mitigate any of it. It just transfers it to somebody else. And, it's just like, our automobile insurance, our health insurance, we're hoping we don't have to use it, but we know we have it when it's there. And so what's happening is these ransomware demands and payouts are becoming so high and becoming so reoccurring that insurance companies are having to fight this. I mean, they're losing money. And I read an article just not too long ago that some of the small town insurance companies are having to close down shop if they've got insurance policies on some of the local businesses. I'm in a discussion all the time, what are the advantages of having some kind of insurance policy like this. And a lot of people don't know that, these cyber policies help pay, regulatory fines. We've touched on that, HIPAA fines or contractual fines. It helps bring in crisis management. They know that most organizations aren't prepared to handle this and run with a full-blown ransomware event on their own. So they have a team come in. You're going to have lawyers involved, I assure you, more than one, and they do not come cheap. And so that type of cyber policy helps pay for those legal funds. There are some insurance policies out there. I'm seeing fewer and fewer of these, but some ransomware policy or cyber policies actually pay for the negotiated ransomware. So once the negotiators come in, they talk with the threat actors, and they come up with an amount to pay. Some insurance companies are covering that cost. And so what this is really doing is insurance companies are stepping back and saying, we're losing our skin here. I mean, this is not a winning game for us. And so I know I've seen a couple of the names on here. Pretty much a good majority of you know about the insurance questionnaires that come out every year from your insurance company. And you've probably seen those increase in length and depth and the amount of information they're trying to gather from you, because they are now starting to put a price tag on your risk. And I'm in more and more conversations where insurance underwriters are requiring, MFA, requiring vulnerability management, EDR, MDR. I'm seeing those as a requirement if you want to maintain insurance. So they're helping drive the shift in this security landscape, but it's also coming at the cost of you. Premiums are going higher. I'm hearing more and more of our customers that getting declined for insurance because they don't have proper safeguards in place. But I mean, really, what is driving this is the amount that's paid out. Insurance companies are just losing too much money.
Yeah, we're definitely having those conversations pretty much on the weekly with, hey, we've got our policy coming back up, and they're saying we got to do this, or our premiums going through the roof. And so you're definitely seeing that.
I'm going to see something like MFA. I'm not a betting man, but I'll bet you a quarter that probably within the next 18 months to 2 years, anybody that's going to apply for a cyber insurance policy has to have MFA on your email, remote access, and any kind of privileged user account. Logging in as a domain admin or logging into your firewall as an admin, that's going to be a hard-nosed requirement. And now with things like AI, that's easily going to be able, once you fill out that questionnaire, patterns are going to be picked up, and the evidence that you submit, it's easily going to be able to, put together some kind of risk pattern associated to you.
Already seeing some required at the endpoint level as well.
Yeah.
I think Ben and I just saw one just a couple of weeks ago, that the first requirement for an MDR. I mean, it had to be a approved.
Had to have it.
Yep.
Yeah, I had to have it there. I've got a question I got sent to me, and I think, Brian, this will be a good one for you. I'm not sure if you can answer it because you're not really coming from the insurance space, but what for a cyber policy do you do when the payouts in an embargoed country where it's a felony to pay them out? So that's a real specific. That may be more of an FBI question, but I don't know.
Well, and that's it. So when you start talking about that type of a business model and that type of an outreach, you're going to have some federal agencies that want to get to sit down with you at the table while this is going on. There are some, there's a green list, a red list, and a gray list. And anytime that the FBI gets involved, I promise you, I don't know if there's any agents on this call, but they will tell you 100% of the time not to pay. Just hands down. There is no negotiation once the FBI is involved, because you are funding, possibly nation state or global terrorism.
Yeah. Don't really know there. So good answer there. Perry, I'm going to switch over to you. We still have 20 minutes here, so I think we got enough questions. And at the end of this, we are going to open it up to any questions that anybody has on here, but keep them coming via the chat. But Perry, what are the mental and cognitive factors that make humans vulnerable to social engineering? And how are these being exploited by AI? And you kind of hit on this earlier, but I want some specifics here.
Yeah, so you're right. We did touch on this earlier. Even like in that first question, when we were talking about people being distracted because they're doing laundry or they're in the middle of life. Um, and then I kind of alluded to it before too, like when somebody is really going to be confronted with a deep fake, in their social media feed. It's not going to be that they have 15 deep fakes in a row. It's going to be that they have 20 legitimate posts in a row, and then the one deep fake that's there, that's the poison thing that's trying to get an action. Or in the middle of somebody's day, there's all this legitimate traffic, and then there's the one dangerous thing that's in there. And so a lot of it comes down to cognitive framing. Is it will come at the time when you're not expecting it, rather than at the time that you're already thinking about deep fakes. And so all the little tells and things that we think somebody's going to pick up on, they're not going to show, because nobody's going to be thinking about that at the time. In the book that I just wrote, it's called Fake, F-A-I-K, because there's AI in the middle of the fake. You know, the thing that I kind of hit on that I think people can remember easily is I talk about this thing called the exploitation zone, which is the fact that technology continues to advance at such a rapid rate. It's kind of in this hockey stick curve versus human adaptability, which kind of goes much more kind of level and goes much slower in its adaptability. And you've seen this all throughout your life. If you're the person that goes into your grandparents' house and the clock on the microwave is flashing noon every time you go there, it's because they've not adapted to the technology. It's hard for them to understand like how to interface with that thing. But we're in a space right now with AI, especially generative AI, when things are advancing so fast that even experts can't keep up and don't know what's possible. And so that creates this thing that I call the exploitation zone. And when it comes to the cognitive factors that leave people vulnerable within that exploitation zone, I really talk about four horsemen within that. The first one is confirmation bias, or I call it the confirmation crusader. So we tend to go and agree with the things that we believe we already agree with, that kind of confirm our worldview and bring us in. The second one is the emotional tempest, so things that inflame our emotions or get us going. The third one is what I call the digital naive, or digital illiteracy, people that don't know what's really possible out there. They're not aware of how to engage with the tools properly, or they've not seen some of the things that people can do. And then the last one is the sower of discord, or really just polarization, online polarization, things that are typically driving people apart or driving people further into their own corners. And I think we see that with a lot of the deep fakes, especially the political ones, or the ones that are kind of trying to poke at a social trend in some way. Internally, we see those reflected a little bit as well, much less on the discord side, but more on confirmation bias. Does this look like something that I would expect? Does it inflame an emotion, the emotional tempest? And does it take advantage of something that I didn't really know was possible? Like we talked about the fact that, somebody could send a OneNote link that was, it's a legitimate link from a Microsoft perspective, but a malicious link once you actually go to it. Once you know that that's possible, now you start to ask different questions about those types of links. But until you know that's a possibility, you're illiterate to that fact. So it's nothing against the person, it's just the fact that they're unaware because they had no frame of reference for the fact that those things were even a possibility. And that's the world that we're living in. Those are the factors, I think, that work against the ways that our minds function. And there's an entire field called cognitive security that's being built right now that takes those things and many more into account.
Real interesting. Just to kind of think on the thinking side of this, and what we need to know and educate our users on beyond just, hey, don't click this link. It's don't fall for the buildup to click that link.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We did have a question in the chat that whoever wants to take it, it's open. I think, I'm not sure who said this, but seeing more and more attacks coming through text messages. Are there any tools available to simulate these attacks, similar like there are to do, we get the phishing simulations to work on that. Besides yearly training, and another question here, besides yearly training, are there any good ways to implement better training surrounding this? And I think it's specific on the text messages.
I can touch on that for a second. So, since I work for a vendor that runs simulations, what I can talk about is the complexities in doing those legally. Because once you're being routed through a phone provider like an AT&T or a Verizon or something, there's an entire set of FCC laws. Also, you're potentially touching somebody's personal device. And there's a lot of siloing that tends to happen around those things. So the way to get through that is, well, of course, if you're like in a military context where you're issuing devices, or if you're in a high security environment where the corporation, the organization owns the device and issues it, then that allows that to open up. Or if you have people that opt into that, then that would start to allow those things to happen. But those are the complexities, and that's why you don't really see the vendor community embrace that very much, unless it's more of an opt-in type of thing. And I'll give you one example. One other way that people want to be able to test isn't just text messaging. It's things like voice phishing. Vishing is what we would call that. And there's a lot of complexities in reaching out with a vish to somebody, unless it's like an approved red team engagement. But to do that as a typical security awareness thing, it's a little bit more difficult, just to kind of throw that out to everybody. But when you change that, when you flip it a little bit and you do it as callback vishing, well, then that's a little bit more. The person on the other side, the end user, is initiating that. So the way that could work is you send out a standard phishing email through your provider of choice, and then the call to action, the click, so to speak, in the phishing email is, we need you to call this number and get back with us and provide X information. Now the end user's call to action is they're dialing a phone number and they're participating in a simulated voice conversation and potentially giving something up. At that point, the responsibility has kind of shifted, and you're engaging them in a way that is permissible through all those other factors that I mentioned before.
Yeah, and I've seen it as well, where organizations have put that into BYOD policies, and as well as, many of our users are allowed to get email on their phone. It's something that's got to be talked about at the higher level, but if you allow your users to have email on their phone, that could be something that you could opt into, just like Perry talked about.
You definitely, if you're letting people use phone, definitely need to have something in place there. And kind of that gray area we always me and Brian run into in these organizations, where they want to do more phone driven because everybody holds their phones all the time, but you got to have some type of policy and think through that because you're using a personal device there. So next question is for Corey. We haven't heard from you in a while. What do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of cybersecurity today?
Highlighted a couple times so far.
Yeah.
And I think that's relying on tools. I'm sure everybody's heard it. People, process, technology, in that order. People in the process are far more important than the technology. Perry has been alluding to it as well, where, it's the old saying that stuck with me is, knowledge is not power. It's what you do with that knowledge that is the most powerful, right? So when it comes to training or anything, or even these tools, I've seen it, right? And I've seen, organizations that go to, like Davenport Group, hey, maybe you can get the tool cheaper going direct with the vendor, right? But that's just the tool. Are you able to support the tool? Do you have the people in the process that Davenport's providing you guys, right, around those tools? Because just having the tool does not make you successful at all. And that's usually where people fail, is relying on the tools. Or, without name dropping, right? Spending like, you know, an offering comes out that's super, super cheap. And it's like, oh, wow, that's an MDR. I can look, it's like, you know, a third of the price I'm paying for this MDR. It's just relying off the tools. Right. And so, you know, and then again, it again goes into why monitoring is so important, because the amount of time it takes someone to respond is important. That timer's ticking, right? As soon as someone has compromised you, that dwell time, that's what it's called, right? The dwell time that they're in there trying to circumvent your security solutions, your tools, right? Going undetected, eventually something's gonna work, right? And so if they're going undetected, by the time your engineer wakes up at, you know, maybe they get to work 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, it's too late. You've already been fully compromised.
Yeah, and it goes back to, hey, if you're just letting the cybersecurity insurance policy drive the conversation and you're just looking for whatever solution checks that box and not really looking and getting a good understanding there, it could bite you in the butt. And that's
process, technology.
Yeah. And that's why I really enjoy and love telling people and stand behind the solutions that we do, is a lot of the security solutions we provide here at Davenport Group are coming as a co-managed solution. It's not just, hey, here's KnowBe4, have fun with it, hope you educate your users. No, with that comes a lot of the, hey, we're going to meet with you on a quarterly basis and really plan out an education strategy, what you're seeing specifically for your organization. What do you want to target? Who are your, who are your bad kids that you're trying, bad users you're trying to really educate there? We're going to work hand in hand with you to help with these solutions as well, not just, sell you a product that's out there. Corey, coming back to you on this one, unless anybody else has anything to kind of highlight there with some of the misunderstood aspects. Yeah, so I think Corey I think that's a big one in relying too much on the tools for sure. But Corey, let me come back to you here. What's the number one thing on the threat landscape that you think we all need to pay attention to in the next 5 years? And I'm going to throw this out to you, besides AI.
I'm going to throw a curveball here. I'm going to throw a curveball as my answer.
Yeah.
I think the thing that we need to pay the most attention to is still doing the basics, because we're not doing them today. Right. Justin, I know your name from the beginning of this webinar. Justin, indicated MFA. I can't tell you how many organizations that I see that just still don't enable it because it's too difficult. It takes too much time. Right. Patching is the easiest and least costly thing that you can do in cybersecurity, but so many organizations aren't doing it. They're not patching. Right. So, being able to identify those, because adversaries know you're not patching because they're using those vulnerabilities against you. Proper firewall configurations, right? So who knows what's going to happen in 5 years? I mean, think about the last 5 years, how much has changed in our lives, all of our lives, work lives, personal lives, cybersecurity, everything has changed, right? But the key thing is if we can make sure that we stick to the basics, and it's funny, when I do webinars, I have this whole street sign of all the most common things. And people that join my webinars hate that slide because I do it every slide because it's what I still see happening every single compromise, right? No MFA, no patching, open RDP on your firewall. I mean, I can just go on and on and on. And it's these basics that we should be doing that we get away from. Because going back to your last question, we're chasing tools. We're assuming the tool is that's my compensating control. It's providing me that safety. Oh, I'm using the KnowBe4, right? I'm doing simulations, but what are you doing with it afterwards, right? Are you patching things? Are you doing what? Again, it's not about your knowledge. It's what you do with that knowledge.
Yep. Brian, anything to
add? What I think is going to play out is I think you're going to see a new generation of leadership start stepping into the chairs, and I think you're going to start seeing a buy-in for cybersecurity. I think you're going to see a new generation come in and understand the risk, understand that it's going to cost money, and find new ways to protect the organization. I do expect that.
Harry hit it earlier as well, where they're going to go back to old ways because we've become complacent, right? Where we now don't even think about snail mail as hitting us, and there's going to be a barcode in that legit letter. We already know people are trying to fake the IRS, And we know if they send you an email, or call you, that's not real. Expect a letter in the mail. So what are they going to do? They're going to send you a letter in the mail. That letterhead's going to look perfect. It's going to have a QR code for your ease of use, right? Boom, they just got you.
Yep.
I always tell everybody, if I just ever decide in my life for some reason that I decide to go to the dark side, I'm focusing on cell phones. Think about all of your personal data that is valuable to any adversary that's retained on these phones. Even your MFA codes, guess what? Boom, right there. Access to your bank account, usually, boom, right there. Everything you need is on these phones. And I still see users just, again, complacent. They're so heavily driven around that desktop and don't do bad things on the desktop. We're not really focusing on the power that's on these phones.
That's a really, really good point. So, and I'll make a confession. So as somebody that works at a company that does security awareness training and simulated phishing, the only time that I've been caught by our own internal simulated phishing has been on my phone, because my desktop habits are pristine. They're built over decades of hovering and looking at stuff and investigating. The cell phone, you're in the middle of the chaos of life and you're not necessarily thinking, or something hits at just the right time, or your notification comes up as you're about to click on something else and you accidentally click the notification instead. How frustrating is that? And that's the behavior pattern. That's the disconnect from all the good habits that cyber criminals are going to focus on. And the fact that they can come in through an unexpected way, like a more physical feeling way. And then also just to reinforce the other thing is that if people just focus on the basics, like what Corey said, it takes care of so many other things. Like, we looked at 100 different threat reports that came out over the past several years. And when you look at like the top 10, 11 reasons that they happen, number one and number two. Number one is social engineering. Number two is unpatched software. So if you're dealing with those, you're taking care of over 80% of your stuff. But even if you look at authentication attacks, which is number three on that list, well, a lot of that is through password dumps and bad password hygiene. Misconfigurations, which is number 5 on that. Well, that's some kind of human error usually. Somebody has taken a shortcut. They've not understood something. Number 7 on that list that we have out of the top 100 is insider attacks. Well, that's another human thing. Usually around social engineering, but you could have a lot of the same models in place that would start to detect that. And then number 10 is, just sheer human error. So focusing on the human, focusing on the low-hanging fruit that is, it's low-hanging in one way, but it's the stuff you just have to grind your way through. It's not fun to deal with the process and the continued program that you have to deal with to do social engineering training well. It's not fun to deal with unpatched software. You can't just buy a commercial off-the-shelf product that you plug in and you walk away from that fixes all your patching and all the other stuff. It's a process. It's a grind. And CISOs nobody likes the grind. They like the promise of something that flashes that they can just spend money on, plug in, and quote unquote solves their problem. And we have to not be complacent that way.
Yeah, don't just rely on those tools. So yeah.
Yep.
Totally get it. So we're ending the webinar soon here, but I think we'll have Brian, Corey, and Perry on here for a few more minutes if anybody wants to stick around and ask us some questions. But, from this, let's connect. You can see we know what we're talking about, and we can really help you out here at Davenport Group. So if you take us up, you'll hear from your account executive in your area. They'll be following up with you. And so if you're interested in meeting with Davenport Group to discuss cybersecurity or any Davenport Group services or some of the solutions that we provide, as a thank you gift, we're going to give you a choice of either a $50 gift card to Lowe's or Home Depot. I'm a Home Depot person, but I know we may have some Lowe's bros out there.
Oh, come on.
So, hey, it's all where you live. That's what I've definitely seen. The Home Depot is a lot better here in OKC, but we're going to give you that as a thank you for meeting with us as a follow-up here. But let's thank you for attending today. And what we want to give you there is you're going to need to email the code cybersecurity back to marketing@davenportgroup.com. What you're going to get with that is you're going to get a customized, I think you can get like a customized gift from Goody. You can select from some of the brands you can get is from JBL, Brooklinen, Fellow, and more. But just make sure you email that code since you're attending here. And like I said, your account executive in your area will be following up with you to see if you want to meet with us to talk about some of the security solutions that we have to offer, deeper dive into what we can help out with your organization, or if you just want to say hi and get to know us a little bit more. But I do want to thank everybody. We had a great attendance today. I want to thank you all for attending. I hope you got a lot out of this, or at least some ideas to bring up to your executive team, your users in your environment to do some more education around that. But again, reach out to us. We're here to help with different solutions. I know there are a number of solutions that were kind of brought up in the chat, brought up in the conversation we can help out with. So if you want to stick around, ask some more questions, we'll be here. But for everybody else, we'll be following up with you soon. Thank you very much. So that was really good, Brian and Corey and Perry. Appreciate all the feedback here. One thing y'all talked about with the phones, and this is actually something brought up. Corey, I think Michael, your boss, brought this up to me. He's like, turn off those push notifications on the MFA, because he's like, some user will get that at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, be flipping through their phone, looking at pictures or whatever, and there's turn. And it just like a habit to hit a.
That's happened. That was the Uber breach, right? It was an MFA fatigue attack. So the attacker just kept pushing over and over and over until that just wore somebody out, and they finally accepted it.
Exactly.
Hey everybody. Hey Ben, how's it going? It's Matt
good.
From RFS. Hey guys, one of the things that I've noticed, and I didn't want to bring it up in the middle of everybody, is that the texting is, I want to say, a newer thing. But even newer than that, and I just experienced it. It's you guys mentioned social media, a link in social media, and to a website that's basically skims your phone and then starts basically transmits those emails that you have in your phone to a hacker. That's something that hasn't even been like in mainstream media yet. How it's the question, how much do you trust? Hey, do you trust Instagram or I was going to say Tinder, wrong site, Twitter? But how much do you trust these sites to scan to make sure that, hey, this code, whether it's anything, a link or a QR code or anything, and it's staying one step ahead of hackers and user, I even had a user Google what is Apple's phone number, and that person called, and they asked her immediately, hey, what's your license? What's your bank account number? And she gave it all. And it, as much as you hammer down user education, sometimes people just don't get it, and so you have to have something in place. If you really want to go, something that gives them, Perry, I think you mentioned this, give them that pause. Hey, do you really want to go to this website? Maybe give them another pause. Do you really, really want to go to this website? It's human nature to want to click.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point on the social media kind of malicious link thing, because a lot of social media advertising campaigns, you're already sending a short link to that because you want to be able to do campaign tracking on it. And once you create a short link on something, you can swap out the final link to that immediately. So if Instagram or somebody does their due diligence initially, but they don't do continued diligence on that, then it can go to a great landing page, the first 10 minutes that it's out there, and then you can just swap it out to your malicious attack after the campaign's approved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. I actually have done, I use Barracuda, and I've used their, it's not Sentinel, it's their email, run this campaign over the course of 2 weeks and blah, blah, blah.
That was the old fish line tool.
Yeah, the old fish line tool. It's called something else. Like everything else, everything is called something else now. I'm thinking of changing my name, just to follow that example.
Right.
But the even like that tool, for example, I'm sad or happy to say I had 49% of people that actually straight up deleted the email. That means 51% clicked. But yeah, still, it's today's day and age,
Yep.
For sure. For sure. Good question. Good question. Does anybody else have any last minute questions here? It's still on?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in.
We have one more. Lando, love the name. Being a Star Wars fan here. What are your thoughts around ZTNA? I have no idea what that is.
It's what's replacing VPNs out there. It's different technologies for zero trust around cloud applications.
Okay.
Yeah.
Zero trust network architecture, I'm guessing.
Yep. Yes, I believe. Network access. Yeah. Well, but again,
access.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's the right use case, right? So you have to look at the use cases. How much are you actually in the cloud? It's what everybody that has been doing VPN is switching over to is ZTNA. It can be far more effective. And I mean, zero trust in general, right, is, in my opinion, the route to go. There tends to be a lot more politics that get involved, internal office politics when it comes to zero trust on anything, and it can become difficult to implement. But I think we're seeing the dying of VPNs in general with ZTNA, especially the more and more that everything's just moving out to the cloud.
Yeah, and it touches exactly what Matt was talking about is, what do you trust? I mean, that's the whole conception of zero trust is you trust nothing. You treat everything as a risk, and you build your infrastructure, your policies, your protections, your monitoring around that nothing is trusted.
Good question, Dave. I think that question came from David Miser. So thanks for the question there, for sure. I'll open up one last question. Anybody that's out there is still listening in. All right. Well, cool. Well, really appreciate you panelists, Corey, Brian, Perry. Thank you so much for your time and expertise today and education around our topic. I think you helped out a lot of folks, or at least are helping them get some more seats at the table to get listened to for some of the solutions that are out there. Also appreciate all our attendees today. Make sure you do email marketing there at Cybersecurity to get that piece, and then follow up with your AEs that'll be reaching out to you soon to set up conversations with Davenport Group. We're here to help, so let us help you. And so everybody, have a great rest of your afternoon, and thank you for your time today. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.